We might be back, baby. We might be back. Welcome, NFL fans. It's Mitch here for another NFL weekly review and reaction, this time to Week 6 of the 2024 NFL season. We might be back. The NFL might actually make sense once again. Week 6 made the most sense of any week this NFL season. Still, some captivating games and some interesting results that we need to dive into. Let me know what you thought of Week 6. What is the biggest takeaway for you? Who do you think looked great? Who do you think looked terrible? And give me any of your thoughts in the comment section below. Gronk spiked the like button, and let's recap every single NFL game, which is what I do in this video every single Sunday, recapping the games every Sunday of the NFL season. Let's go. Gronk spiked the like button, and let's begin with the headliner. The Dallas Cowboys are not just bad, but they might absolutely suck. The Dallas Cowboys got hammered, obliterated, and demolished by the Detroit Lions. The game is actually currently still being played. The score is 47-9, but I said the Dallas Cowboys are so disgustingly terrible that I have to begin the recap early. Because why not? We're 47-9. Hendon Hooker's in the game. I mean, my goodness. The Lions. Wow. Talk about a revenge game. Talk about a coaching staff wanting to make a statement. Talk about a team that took all their anger and all their pent-up aggression from that wacky primetime 2023 regular season game, wrapping it all up into a big ball and continuously chucking play after play after play after play and making it known that the Detroit Lions are here to stay. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Detroit Lions, 47-9. This game actually began pretty interestingly in terms of, I thought Dallas was going to hang around because their offense was going to allow them to hang around. It actually was 7-3 after the first quarter, and Dallas was moving the football early in this game. But then the second quarter happened, and the Lions outscored the Dallas Cowboys 20-3 in the second quarter, allowing the score to be 27-6 at halftime. And the game was basically over from there on out. But this was pure domination all the way around. Basically, after the first two drives of the game, Detroit's defense got a handle on Dallas's offense. There was a big interception Dak threw into the end zone that was intercepted by Brian Branch, which completely flipped and turned the game into what would become a blowout. The Detroit Lions, 10 more first downs than the Dallas Cowboys, and that's honestly being kind of nice to Dallas. 26 first downs, 16 for Dallas. Detroit was actually not too efficient on third down, only 3 for 9, but they were extremely efficient on the first two downs because as we projected and as we predicted, Detroit would be able to run the ball all over the Dallas Cowboys defense, which everybody that has a decent running game and a decent offensive line, not named the Pittsburgh Steelers because they don't have either of those things, are able to do against the Dallas Cowboys. 179 rushing yards. And again, there's still 2 minutes left in the game as I'm recording this. 53 for Dallas. So the area that we thought would be dominated by Detroit was dominated by Detroit. And this begins the sequence of events that would become Week 6 in the NFL, the makes sense week in the NFL. I feel like the entire season this year, there's been some weeks that have been a little bit more educated, a little bit more calculated than others. But this week, you actually set forth a vision of the game. And I set forth a vision of each game. It's what I do for all of my bets. It's what I do for all of my picks. It's how I break down games. and I look at weaknesses and I look at strengths. And for the first time this season, and by the way, I think this is going to continue for most of the rest of the year. There'll be probably a couple of wacky weeks, a couple of wacky upsets that just don't make any sense. But for a majority of the season, we have just been seeing upset after upset. Makes no sense after makes no sense. Turnovers, wacky punt returns, like wacky crap. And there was one game like that appeared to be going one way that ended up flipping back the other way. But this game was kind of like the headline of this made sense. Now, did it make sense that Dallas lost by like 40 points? Not necessarily, but Detroit being able to own the ground game, being able to possess the ball, being able to keep Dallas in unconventional offensive situations, third and long, second and longs, long distance situations, Dallas being one-dimensional, not being able to run the ball on Detroit and kind of refusing to run the ball and kind of only trusting Dak Prescott to make plays through the air, which ended up backfiring on them. Detroit being able to do whatever they wanted on offense because their play action game, really got uplifted by the rushing attack. Great protection up front because there's no Micah Parsons, no DeMarcus Lawrence. The ability to hit Jameson Williams deep on multiple plays because the cornerbacks of Dallas are very slow and can't run with Jameson Williams. And Detroit ends up totaling 308 passing yards, 179 rushing yards, 487 total yards. They had 4 sacks on defense, a couple of them coming from timely blitzes in key situations where Dallas was looking like they were surging down the field. They were going for it on 4th down. They had a big 3rd down, and all of a sudden, Dak would get blitzed. He would have nowhere to go with the ball against tight man coverage, and he would go down. And as last week and weeks previous, I kind of feel like Dallas has lost games, but not necessarily because of Dak. I feel like this game was probably the worst game I've seen Dak play all year. It hasn't been an incredible, great year for Dak. It's been a pretty mid-year for Dak. But honestly, this was the worst game I've seen him play. He was forcing the ball into tight windows. Dallas, really was only featuring CeeDee Lamb, and everybody else kind of was not really making any plays. Ferguson was very quiet. Tolbert didn't step up in the way that he did against Pittsburgh. The run game, again, was pretty useless. Mike McCarthy got completely out-schemed and out-coached on offense compared to Aaron Glenn's defense, which is pretty rare because Detroit's defense is not particularly known for their incredible coaching. But Detroit is able to, again, win the line of scrimmage, dominate time of possession, dominate the ball. Montgomery had a huge game. Gibbs had a huge game. Goff had an efficient game. Jameson Williams had an explosive game. And it's pretty much exactly what you would expect from the Detroit Lions in a big victory, right? Jared Goff ends up going 18 for 25, 315 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That is a perfect passer rating. 153.8 passer rating, which, that's deadly. Goff. And again, this wasn't a Goff game where it was like, wow, he's hitting every single throw, outside the numbers, inside the numbers, right? Stepping away from pressure, taking hits in the pocket. This was not a picture-perfect Jared Goff game in terms of, he's making all these throws. He's making all these plays. It's really great protection, run game to feed off of. He's hitting his back foot. Guys are open. It was a pretty easy game for Jared Goff, and he put it up an easy 300 yards, an easy 3 touchdowns, an easy perfect passer rating, if that's even a possible thing. Meanwhile, Dak Prescott was struggling through 2 terrible interceptions in the game, had a 42 passer rating, 17 for 33, 178 yards, and I think this was a statement game for Ben Johnson. I think this was a statement game for Ben Johnson in terms of, hire me, NFL. Hire me, Jerry Jones. Do you want your quarterback to look this good without having to do a thing? Hire me, right? I think this is also a game where Jerry Jones has to seriously think about the future of his coaching because Mike McCarthy was pretty good last week, I thought. I thought he actually outcoached Mike Tomlin. But this week, not only was the personnel decisions kind of at hand in terms of fixing the offensive line in Dallas, kind of like the way that I'm seeing it in New England right now. Not nearly as bad, but similar decisions were made. Let's go cheap on the offensive line. Let's go young on the offensive line. Dallas struggling on the offensive line, especially against the blitz right now. Then you talk about the running game. Dallas, let's go cheap at running back. We're going to have Rico Dowdle at running back. We only give him 5 carries in the game. He actually has 5 yards per carry. But we don't want a running back that can be a threat. We don't want a running back that can take pressure off Dak Prescott. Let's not sign Derrick Henry, who's having an MVP caliber season, Offensive Player of the Year candidate season. Let's go with Rico Dowdle, who's never proven to be even an RB2 at an effective, efficient level. Let's just run with him and old man Zeke Elliott. So decisions were made, business decisions were made from the Dallas Cowboys this offseason, which led me to believe that they would not be a great football team this year. That led me to believe that they would be decent. They would have a pretty effective offense because Dak is still a good quarterback. CeeDee Lamb is unbelievable. And they do have a couple pieces. Zach Martin, right? Tyler Smith is a good player. Jake Ferguson is a good player. And I thought their defense would still be average because they had Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, who are both injured right now, by the way. So that was exposed to a greater degree this week than a team like Pittsburgh was able to do. Trayvon Diggs, Deron Bland, they still got players. Donovan Wilson. But overall, I look at Dallas and I say, this team is very flawed. And I've been saying that all year. They're very flawed on the offensive line. They don't have a running game. Their run defense is very exposable. Their back end, due to the running game being very exposable, is left out to dry. I don't necessarily think that it's the secondary. I think it's because they're so reactionary to the run game and they're so worried about the run game. It puts their pass defense in really bad situations. It doesn't allow them to tee off the way they could a couple years ago in the pass defense or pass rush department. This was pure domination. This was Ben Johnson saying, NFL, you see this performance. You see what I'm able to do. You see that I'm throwing to Penei Sewell. You see these trick plays. You see these play actions. You see these guys wide open. You see how I unlock Jameson Williams. You see how I unlock Sam Laporta. Every single investment we have made on offense, Jahmyr Gibbs, Penei Sewell, every single one, David Montgomery, I put up these guys in my system and they perform. So Jerry Jones, you can pay this guy and that guy and they're going to come through for you. Your money is going to be well invested because these plays work. And that's, I think, what Ben Johnson got across in this game. Now, I will also say, just a side point about the Lions, I think the Lions looked the part. They looked like the Lions. I mean, I'm not shocked by this at all. This is how the Lions can play when they're at their best. They run the ball. They're overpowering. Their offense, it looks exactly the way you would think it would look. It looked like last year, right? The one added element is Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams is different. There's a reason Jameson Williams was my number one receiver in that draft class. And I think finally we're seeing the evidence that he is the biggest game breaker in that draft class at that receiver position. Is Drake London maybe a bit better, right? Like, I love Drake London too. Like, he is a good player in that class. Yes, but he's not nearly as explosive. Is Garrett Wilson a good, talented player that maybe is a little underwhelming right now in New York? Yes. But has had statistically impressive seasons with bad quarterback play? Yes. But is Jameson Williams not the fastest guy that every single time he gets the ball, he could change a game? Absolutely. And we're seeing that this year for Detroit. That I think is a big difference maker compared to, years past with this offense, even last season. On top of that, every time Jahmyr Gibbs gets the ball, he's explosive, right? If they can actually, the weird thing is, the guys that were like the main functions of this offense last year, David Montgomery, Sam Laporta, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, have been kind of like the most underwhelming elements in terms of like consistent production, which is kind of odd to me. But Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams have kind of cranked up their level of explosiveness, which has almost allowed them to have more of a plethora of attack, more widespread production instead of spamming Amon-Ra a million times, right? CeeDee Lamb did have 7 catches for 89 yards on 14 targets, which is just highly inefficient. And the Lions did exactly what I thought. They doubled him. They tried to take him away as much as possible. I thought Carlton Davis had one of his best games as a Lion in this game. Very aggressive, very physical. And the Lions defense, I thought they played very, very well. We know what they can do against the run. I thought their pass rush was pretty good. And, they look like, in this game, they looked kind of like what people thought they would reach in terms of their potential. Do I think they're still flawed in the secondary? Yes. Do I think they'll be exposed against better passing games? Potentially more balanced offenses, potentially more deeper receiving attacks? Yes, like the Seahawks, for example, definitely. But I felt this was their best game. And the big headline here for Detroit, unfortunately, is that in such an impressive outing, in such an impressive game, in such an impressive result, they lose their best defensive player and arguably their best player this season, which is Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson looked like he broke something in his leg. So, unfortunately, he may be out for a while, if not the entire season, which would significantly hinder the Lions' chances of winning the NFC and winning the Super Bowl. I would not rule them out from being still a contender, but if they do not get Hutchinson back for the playoffs, it would be hard to imagine them being able to withstand that loss because he is their defensive game changer. And without him, you do wonder how they're still able to rush the quarterback the same. Their pass rush may be significantly hindered. Their run defense setting the edge might not be the same. Marcus Davenport was also lost to the season. So the Lions have had some defensive line edge injuries already. Maybe they make a trade at the deadline for somebody to try to up their pass rush, to try to replace the production that Hutchinson brought. But that's very hard, right? That's like the Niners losing Nick Bosa. That's like the Raiders losing Max Crosby. That's like the Steelers losing TJ Watt. That's a very, very, very impactful player on defense. There's very few of those players in the NFL. And I wish Hutchinson the best. I know he's my brother. We do kind of look like we're related. So shout out to him. I appreciate the Lions fans out there. I hope you guys enjoyed this ass kicking of the Dallas Cowboys at the hands of the Detroit Lions. This was not exactly unexpected in terms of a demolishment, in terms of a blowout, in terms of a domination from Detroit. I thought that would be the case, but I did think Dallas's offense would produce a little bit more, and that was definitely disappointing. Dak has definitely had his worst game of the year, and Dallas has to go back to the drawing board. I almost wonder if they make a move in terms of coaching or something. They got to do something. Like, this team is very discouraging right now in Dallas. So 47-9, that was the headliner. Next up, let's go back to the London game, which was the first game today. 35-16, the Chicago Bears. Before we get to that, just a quick shout out to all my Canadians out there who are celebrating Thanksgiving in Canada. Shout out to you guys. Of course, this game on NFL Network was, again, not visible on NFL Network, so I hope you have some sort of package that allows you to get this game, whether it be DAZN or TSN or whatever. So shout out to the Canadians that do watch my channel. As a fellow Canadian, happy Thanksgiving to you. 35-16, Chicago ends up defeating Jacksonville in, I would say, a surprising blowout. I did pick the Bears to win. I did pick the Bears to cover, but I was still slightly shocked by the way Chicago was able to dominate the second half of this game, specifically outscoring Jacksonville 21-14, and really it wasn't that close. Chicago also dominated the second quarter with 14 points. Chicago had 25 first downs, which is nearly the same amount as Detroit. They were 5 for 11 on third down and 1 for 1 on fourth down. And I think the key ingredient to this attack was their running game, which has steadily gotten better throughout the season. DeAndre Swift had 91 yards on 17 carries, 5.4 yards per carry, and a touchdown. A little bit of Roschon Johnson mixed in there as well, but 152 yards on the ground from Swift. Caleb rushed a little bit as well. 221 passing yards from Chicago and 373 total yards. Their defense played well as expected. It wasn't an utterly dominant performance by their defense, but they definitely had a couple of key turnovers of Trevor Lawrence, who did throw an interception. There was also, I think, a fumble in this game at some point, if I'm not mistaken, by Jacksonville. I think it was Evan Ingram who ended up fumbling the ball. But Jacksonville kind of didn't have a terrible offensive day. They kind of kept shooting themselves in the foot. They were 7 for 15 on third down and 2 for 2 on fourth down. They were actually pretty good in those high leverage situations. And they really failed to get the run game going. D'Ernest Johnson led their team in rushing with 28 yards, which ETN had like negative fantasy points. Tank Bigsby had like 25 yards rushing. I think they relied too much on Trevor Lawrence in this game to get their offense going, and it just wasn't good enough. So, when I think about this game, 8 penalties from Jacksonville, only 2 for Chicago. I think about how Caleb was efficient. He didn't have to do too much, but he was very effective off of, I think, the running game insulating the offense, kind of allowing him to work off of successful running game and then picking his matchups. I thought they had a number of nice schemed up plays for Cole Kmet. He had 2 touchdowns in this game for 70 yards. Keenan Allen had 2 touchdowns in this game on one-on-one plays. One, I think, was a fade ball. And, so Caleb Williams, 4 touchdowns in this game, 23 for 29, 124 passer rating. I didn't sit there and like, I wasn't wowed by Caleb in this game, but I did think this was the type of game that this is what they need at quarterback. This is what they want at quarterback. This was efficient. This was accurate. Did he miss a couple times down the field as usual? Yes. Did he throw maybe not the best interception? Yes. But 4 touchdowns, picking his matchups, finding his guys. DJ Moore was relatively quiet, but I do think he scored in this game. Or maybe he didn't score, but I think he had like almost a score. He got to the 1-yard line on one of the plays. That's why I thought he scored. But, he made a couple plays, but a lot of it was Cole Kmet, some Keenan Allen, which they unlocked in this offense, which they previously mentioned they wanted to get more involved, and a lot of DeAndre Swift. And Swift was hugely efficient in this game. So, yeah, 35-16, I don't think that entirely tells the story. I didn't really think it was this big of a blowout when watching it. But I do feel like Chicago's defense, once again, they were able to get after Trevor Lawrence. They were able to sack him 4 times. Lawrence, just inconsistent. Again, pressure wasn't really evident early, but it came to a head in the second half. Evan Ingram did make some plays. It was nice to have him back in the offense in Jacksonville, but he also fumbled. Gabe Davis is terrible, and they continue to force feed him the ball. Brian Thomas had one of his quietest games of the season, and I think that definitely held them back because Jalen Johnson kept him in check. Christian Kirk was relatively quiet, but I think most importantly for Jacksonville, the run game. And I think that was, again, a difference here. The run game, right? I've been saying this all year. The run game, especially with this pretty systematic quarterback play we're seeing in the NFL right now. Whichever teams can run the ball seem to be getting better quarterback play. And I don't think that's necessarily a coincidence, right? Caleb played better than Trevor. What happened? Well, the Bears ran the ball better, which opened things up for Caleb to make more plays. The pass protection, because of play action and because of the threat of the run, was more efficient. And Jacksonville's secondary is atrocious. They let guys wide open. They get beat one-on-one way too much. So this was an easy day for Caleb to read the field because Jacksonville doesn't play a lot of zone. They play a lot of man. They try to match up. They blitz every once in a while, and Caleb was able to get the ball out on time because his receivers were winning their matchups, which is exactly what I said in my predictions video. So that's pretty much what happened. Chicago wins 35-16. Run game. Detroit wins in a blowout. Bears win in a blowout. Why? They're both running the ball better than their opponent. Next up, let's stick with the morning games. One of the wild games of the day was Tampa Bay winning 51-27 over the New Orleans Saints. This game started off 17-0 for the Bucs. Chris Godwin with his first touchdown, 4 yards out. Then an Antoine Winfield fumble return for a touchdown, which put them up 14-0. And at that point, I'm like, this game's already over. It's Spencer Rattler. It's a rookie. I know it's at home, but the Saints aren't going to catch up. The Bucs are going to dominate. This is going to be a blowout. But then Chase McLaughlin, 17-0. Then after the first quarter, all of a sudden, the Saints just get play after play after play. So they kick a field goal at 17-3. They have a little bit of an efficient drive. Then Shaheed gets a punt return, a 47-yard punt return, which, by the way, Tampa's special teams in this game was awful the entire game. Then they had another field goal, so that tied the game at 17. Then at halftime, I believe the game was actually a lead for the Saints. They were up 27-24 at halftime in this game because Means scored a touchdown from Rattler, and then Kamara scored a touchdown. Sean Tucker also got a touchdown, which, by the way, shout out Sean Tucker, had a huge game in this game. His first ever real action as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer where he got significant snaps. He had 14 carries for 136 yards, 9.7 yards per carry, and a touchdown. And honestly, Sean Tucker is a home run hitter. I loved him coming out of college. I thought he was going to be a really good running back. He actually ended up going undrafted. And yeah, Sean Tucker, I think he's explosive. I think he's dangerous in space. I think he's a good pass catcher, but definitely a guy that reads, hits a hole, a one-cut running back. Honestly, Rachaad White might be the third best runner on this team. So that needs to be evaluated. They should be playing all 3 of these running backs. Maybe Rachaad White becomes more of a third down back. Irving and Tucker maybe split some more carries, but The Bucs offense, once again, proving to be one of the most dynamic offenses in the league, even to the point where their defense and their special teams allows 27 points to Spencer Rattler and company at halftime. And then they go on to put up 27 of their own points in the second half. And the Saints scored 27 points in one quarter, which was the second quarter. They scored 0 in the first, the second, or the first, the third, and the fourth quarter. 0 points. They scored 27 in the second. 0 points in the first, third, and the fourth. So, crazy game. But Baker Mayfield ends up going 24 for 36, 325, 4 touchdowns. He has 3 picks. One of them was not really his fault. It's kind of a fluke. But Baker did not play his best game, but he was still pretty darn good at 325 yards. Chris Godwin had one of the best touchdowns you'll see all day of the last few weeks. Chris Godwin, 55-yard yak touchdown, basically off of a throw to the flat. Kind of like Jamar Chase's touchdown against the Panthers or maybe the Ravens. Either way, kind of like that touchdown where Chris Godwin bounces off a couple people. He ends up running for a 55-yard touchdown. Cade Otton had another touchdown. Irving had one, and Tucker had another. So Tucker ends up with 2 touchdowns, a receiving and a rushing. Godwin has 2. Winfield gets 1 on defense, and Otton and Irving get the others. Baker continues to put up career numbers, over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. Rattler in his first ever NFL start was up and down, 22 for 40, 243, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, and a 60.7 rating. Once again, the Saints not able to control the game. Why? They weren't able to run the ball. 13 carries, 40 yards, 3.1 yards per carry for Alvin Kamara. Their offensive line injuries continued to kill them. Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, I thought looked pretty good in his return. Antoine Winfield looked good in his return. Some key blitzes from him, some big turnovers from him, and the run defense overall, the Bucs came through. Also, the Bucs were able to kind of, play better in the second half defensively. But I am concerned about the Bucs in terms of their defense. That's probably the biggest concern about them. But I think offensively, they pretty much can go in a shootout and play anybody in a shootout. So that's pretty exciting if you're a Bucs fan. Tampa had 31 first downs in this game against a decent Saints defense. I mean, this is not a terrible defense in New Orleans, but that's 2 weeks in a row where they've looked really bad on defense, right? New Orleans looked terrible against the Chiefs. They were allowing wide open players. Their pass rush looked pathetic. Their run defense looked even worse. And now that kind of puts a little bit of context behind that Chiefs performance offensively without Rashee Rice still having a dominant day, because the Bucs put up way better numbers than the Chiefs did. I mean, 31 first downs, 6 for 10 on third down, 277 rushing yards from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that finished dead last in yards per attempt in 2023 and 2022. And then 594 total yards for the Bucs is absolutely outrageous. They also had 5 sacks on the young quarterback Rattler, thanks to a number of different Todd Bowles schemed it up blitzes, and a lot of those happened near the end of the game. And still, Tampa had 12 penalties and were able to put up 51 points on the Saints. So the Saints look like frauds after the first couple of games. They looked potent, they looked explosive, but you can't even really say that with Derek Carr, the Saints win this game. I honestly don't even know if you could say that. I think their defense played awful. Their special teams actually played really well, but that wasn't enough to keep them in this game. 51-27. A little bit deceptive for the amount of points the Bucs allowed because of some of the, the punt return, just kind of the turnovers, three interceptions for Baker. I thought that the Saints really didn't move the ball as efficiently or effectively, in my opinion, as the stats or the numbers would even suggest. They did have a little bit of a good second quarter, but I think the Bucs were able to bounce back in a big way defensively. So Baker and the Bucs continue to roll. They are now 4-2, and they sit right up at the top of the NFC South alongside the Atlanta Falcons. Continuing with the day, the Colts and the Titans. Colts beat the Titans 20-17. This was on the second TV today while I was doing the Patriots live stream. Colts were 20 first downs to the Titans 16. The Colts better on third down, and that might have been the difference. 7 for 15 compared to 4 for 11. And they had 269 total yards against the Titans. Arguably a top 5 defense in the NFL. I would say that the reason that the Colts won, I just think came down to better quarterback play, better management of the game from Joe Flacco compared to Will Levis, and ultimately less turnovers. The Titans had 2 turnovers, the Colts had 1. And basically, both teams punted 5 times. The Titans did have 11 penalties, so that also doesn't help. Their offensive line is also not very good. The time of possession was fairly even, and the run game was actually more efficient for the Titans than the Colts, as maybe expected, because the Colts run game without Jonathan Taylor, not the greatest. Tony Pollard did have a good game, 17 for 93, 5.5 yards per carry, and a touchdown, one of them being a 23-yard draw for a touchdown. But the game appeared to be going the Titans' way early. They were up 10-7 at one point in the game, and they felt like they were the better team early in the game. But ultimately, the fourth quarter, Joe Flacco comes through with a game-winning drive to Michael Pittman. A nice catch in a jump ball scenario. Joe Flacco, it's 4th down, I think, actually, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. It was 4th down, and Flacco is backpedaling away from a blitz that was sent by Gus Bradley. Flacco just made an incredible throw, or not Gus Bradley. It was sent by the Titans. Gus Bradley backpedals. He throws off his back foot, one-on-one to Pittman, and Pittman comes down with it, and that was the game-winning touchdown. But Flacco is 22 for 38, 189, 2 touchdowns. He did throw an interception, but this is against one of the best defenses in football. Meanwhile, Will Levis had 95 yards, a touchdown, interception. He was pretty bad in this game. He missed a number of throws. He obviously did not put up a number of yards. He had 16 completions for only 95 yards, which is borderline pathetic. I think the Titans seriously need to consider a quarterback change. I think the Titans need to consider the future of this football team, maintaining their defense level of play strength, because as we've seen with Cleveland, if teams give up on their quarterback, they're not going to want to continue to play at a high level. I know Cleveland responded a little bit this week, but I just think, maybe put Mason Rudolph in there next week. You're getting one of the worst quarterback plays in football, and I think if they have a better quarterback in this game, if you've switched quarterbacks, I think the Titans win pretty easily, probably like 27-3. But Flacco made a number of more throws, in the pocket, tough throws, and Flacco's just more mature at the position, I think more accurate. And Will Levis is bad. Will Levis is terrible. Nothing else has to be said. 95 yards on 16 completions is pathetic. And Calvin Ridley can't get a catch. 0 catches on 8 targets is pretty miraculous. DeAndre Hopkins maybe had a couple plays, but that was about it. I think the only offensive threat for Tennessee right now is Tony Pollard. That's really about it, because the quarterback on Tennessee can't get anybody the ball right now. So, yeah, 20-17, Colts win a tight AFC South divisional contest. Right now, the Colts are sitting at 3-3 somehow. If they continue to play their better quarterback, I think they'll continue to be competent, while Tennessee is 1-4. Anthony Richardson would have lost this game. Next up, we have the Packers and the Cardinals, which was also one of the morning games. This was domination from the Packers early in the game. A little bit later, it became a little bit closer and maybe deceptive, the score. But ultimately, you get a 24-0 lead, and you're sitting pretty good if you're the Packers, right? And I do regret not making the Packers a best bet at -5.5. I had it early in the week as one of my best bets. I got a little scared because people like the Cardinals to keep this one close. But as I mentioned in my picks video, and as I've been mentioning, even in the recap last week about the Cardinals, and this is why you should watch these recaps, to understand which teams were lucky to win and which teams were unfortunate to lose, and that sort of thing. The Cardinals were one of the luckiest teams in the NFL last week in any game I've seen all year. The Cardinals should have lost to the Niners, and it was completely a fluke. So the Packers come out and they pretty much, dominate the Cardinals like the Niners did early in that game last week, but then they just finish the game and they don't allow the Cardinals to come back. So again, another pretty lackluster Kyler performance, 22 for 32, 214 and a touchdown. Not catastrophically bad, but he didn't really do anything to change the game. Not a lot of explosive runs, not a lot of explosive plays. The read option was very much lacking success. James Conner had one of his worst games of the season. And the storyline of the game is the Packers' 27 first downs. Their run game I felt like was solid in this game with 179 total yards. Jacobs actually only was 62 of those yards and a 3.4 yards per carry. Jacobs kind of continues to struggle, which is low-key not a good thing for the Packers because they invested in him. You do kind of wonder if Aaron Jones was still there, how good this offense would be, how much better this offense would be, because Jacobs is actually not playing well right now. And I think a lot of the other running backs are outshining him or playing better than him. And a big note for Jordan Love, he had a bounce back game, 22 for 32, 258, 4 touchdowns, and interception. He's a lock to go over his 1.5 touchdowns every week of the season. He throws a number of touchdowns every week. People kind of ignore that, but Dobbs scored 2 of them. Watson got a deep one, and Reed scored 1. So all the top 3 targets at wide receiver all contributed with big plays. Dobbs had a 20-yard touchdown. Dobbs had a 10-yard touchdown. Watson had a 44-yard touchdown. And Reed had a 5-yard touchdown. So everybody got in on it. Watson was back. Dobbs was back. They both showed up in this game. 27 first downs for the Packers. Explosive offense as expected. But I think a little bit more of a ball control this week, right? 36 minutes of possession compared to past weeks where it felt like their defense was playing too much. Love was a little bit more erratic. There was less success, less first downs to their offense, more explosion, right? 27 first downs tells a story for the Packers that they got closer to what Matt LaFleur wants this offense to be, which is more of a slow, controlled, methodical approach and less about just the big play, which Love, when he's on it, when he's accurate, when he gets the ball where it needs to go quickly, that's how this offense can operate. 7 for 12 on third down, 1 for 1 on fourth down, 437 yards in the game, and only 1 punt. It was utter domination by the Packer offense. And the Cardinals, they actually had a chance to make this one sort of competitive, except they fumbled the ball 3 different times. They didn't throw an interception. They fumbled 3 times. Trey McBride had his 8 catches for 96 yards, but otherwise, everyone else was pretty quiet. Michael Wilson scored a touchdown. But the Cardinals continue to be, in my opinion, like one of the teams that a lot of people don't put in that bottom tier of the NFL, but they're certainly in the bottom tier of the NFL. They're not a good team. Their defense sucks, and their offense is just not consistent enough right now, and they shoot themselves in the foot. So 34-13, the much better team showed up here at home. Next up, the Cleveland Browns and the Philadelphia Eagles. 20-16, Eagles take it. I didn't see much of this game, so I'm not going to lie. This is one that I'm going to have to go back and watch. But pretty much the story here is that the Eagles, I think, are starting to become a little bit overrated. They could have lost this game. This game came down to the end. They did obviously have a little bit of an unlucky field goal return for a touchdown by Rodney McLeod. But other than that, I mean, if it were not for A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith bailing out Jalen Hurts on long touchdowns, I think this game could have been flipped in the result. Hopkins, I think, also missed a field goal, if I'm not mistaken. Deshaun Watson was 16 for 23, 168, and a 90 passer rating. At least he didn't throw an interception in this game. But he was only 3 for 12 on third down, and the Browns were 3 for 12 on third down. And I read a stat that previous to this game, he was 0 for 26 with Cleveland on third down, which is fucking pathetic. Like, it is so bad. It's not even, like, I think Bailey Zappi could go 8 for 26. So, 244 total yards is not going to win you many games if you're the Browns. And once again, the Eagles defense, I think, had a pretty solid game here. It's their offense that's a little bit disappointing. The Eagles, once again, had 5 sacks. Deshaun Watson continues to take way too many sacks. And, 7 penalties for Cleveland. Not too many penalties in this game, only 12 total. Time of possession, Cleveland actually had more. And that's the thing that I'd like to point to is Cleveland actually was moving the ball a little bit. They were actually kind of possessing the ball a little bit. And it just felt like they were not able to make those key plays, those key moments, because their quarterback is awful and their run game's a bit inconsistent. Pierre Strong ends up leading the Browns backfield, 8 for 43, 5.4 yards per carry. And, Ford got injured, who I had in my fantasy team, of course. On one of my fantasy teams, I had to play him because I have a bunch of buys. Kyron Williams, Kareem Hunt, Nico's hurt, Neighbors is hurt. So I had to play somebody. And Ford ends up, getting 1 point because, of course. But yeah, the Eagles, I think one of the more overrated teams in football. Saquon was held in check, and that's not a good sign. 18 carries, 47 yards, 2.6 yards per carry. Don't really want to blame Saquon. This is the Browns defense, a very good defense, very good run defense. A.J. Brown is back, 6 catches for 116 yards and a touchdown. I think you can treat him like he is the number one receiver that he is still, despite the hamstring injury, so he looks rejuvenated. But Jalen Hurts, man, I mean, the numbers look good, 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 9 incompletions, and 126 rating. But Hurts is not really playing that well right now, and I think it's really hindering this team and holding them back. Only 20-16 for the Eagles. A little bit disappointing there. They were 9-point favorites, but they still win, so I guess that is nice. Drake May Day it is. 41-21. The Texans do still demolish and cover against the Patriots, but this game could have been closer. For sure. The Patriots had some unfortunate calls by the refs early in the game, and of course 4 turnovers, 2 of which were pretty much Austin Hooper's fault. And so, an interception by May that was pretty tough to swallow. But the Patriots fumbled twice. They throw 2 picks. That allowed short fields. CJ Stroud was efficient, but not amazing. 20 for 31, 192, 3 touchdowns. He did have an interception that was off the hands of Dalton Schultz in the end zone and intercepted miraculously by Marcus Jones. But Drake May is the story of this game. A number of people, I'm going to talk about the Texans as well, but a number of people obviously will take the result of the Texans winning by 20, putting up a 40-burger on the Patriots defense, which is not too shabby, not too bad on the road. That's what the Texans need. That's what they want. They haven't been super explosive on offense this year. They haven't put up a ton of points this season, so that's definitely something that they needed. Will Anderson had 3 sacks. He was highly disruptive in this game. He's one of the best players in this football game. But Drake May was the storyline. He was the storyline coming in. He was anyone that anybody was talking about. And he goes 20 for 33, 243 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions with an 88.3 passer rating. As I mentioned, the 1 interception was really unlucky. It got deflected by Will Anderson at the line and then caught literally over Austin Hooper. So the ball, Austin Hooper was blocking for a swing pass, and the ball was tipped, and then the corner caught the ball through the back of Hooper like that. So honestly, not Drake May's fault. But Drake May threw a beautiful first touchdown pass of his NFL career as a starter to Kayshon Boutte for 40 yards, a beautiful deep ball, which was what I said about Drake May, man. He is the best deep ball thrower in this draft class, including Jaden Daniels. I mean, that showed on tape. He is a very good deep passer. And even with a guy like Kayshon Boutte, not Terry McLaurin, he's still able to make that play. And actually, Kayshon Boutte, I got to give him credit. I think he's played pretty well this year for what we expect of him as a Patriots fan. I'd also say that Drake showed off his athleticism. He ran the ball well, and I wouldn't be shocked if he actually led the team in rushing yards in this game. I don't exactly know, but Antonio Gibson was terrible. I mean, 13 carries for 19 yards, and not really his fault. I think a lot of it was the offensive line just not being able to block. The Patriots' offensive line had players that I've barely ever heard of. Zach Thomas, who is not the linebacker of the Dolphins, but the left tackle of the Patriots, who Adrian Lowe got injured early in this game. That didn't help Drake May necessarily, especially on the strip sack by Danielle Hunter. What else? I mean, Hasty didn't do much on the ground. Jalen Polk is bad. Like, he's actually actively a bad player. I don't want Patriots fans telling me he's good. A lot of fantasy analysts think he's good for some reason because of advanced metrics that show his separation, but I don't see any separation. I've been watching every game, every snap of the Patriots season. Jalen Polk is not very good. I would get Javon Baker in there. He can't run. He's not explosive. And his hands. I mean, he dropped 2 easy first downs that were right in his hands. Hunter Henry made a couple nice plays. He caught a touchdown. And he also had a nice play as well. Demario Douglas, I thought, was one of the shining parts of the Patriots. He had 6 catches on 9 targets for 92 yards and a touchdown. If he's available in your fantasy league, I would definitely pick him up. And I think the biggest thing about Drake, man, I think Drake, statistically speaking, like 3 touchdowns is more touchdowns than Jacoby Brissett has on the entire season. 3 touchdowns in 1 game. Drake May had 243 passing yards, which no quarterback yet this year, Jacoby Brissett, had not had 200 passing yards in a game. So May was statistically a better player than Jacoby Brissett has been all year. And did he make a couple of mistakes? Sure. I mean, could he have been a little bit better in certain moments? Could he have been a little bit more accurate on certain throws? Sure. I think he missed like 4 or 5, a handful of throws that he should have maybe made. But I thought he also made a number of plays, including some deep explosive passes, some plays under pressure. I think he does a good job managing the pocket. I think he's good in terms of his stepping up, his stepping away from pressure. He's like very smooth in terms of his athleticism. He never really feels like he's a guy that's ever going to be caught from behind. He's one of those quarterbacks that has effortless kind of speed. Very similar to CJ Stroud in terms of they don't appear to be fast, but they're just never really caught from behind. And also, I thought he showed a couple big arm strength throws, couple improv plays. For Houston, I thought Diggs played really, really well. He had 6 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown, especially early. I thought he was good. I thought this was Tank Dell's best game of the season. I thought this was the Texans' best game in terms of penalties. They only had 4 penalties in this entire game. So part of that is Patriot bias. Refs seem to be calling more penalties on the Patriots that make no sense than I think any team I've seen in the NFL this year. It's almost like they want them to be bad or like they know they're bad, so they just call extra penalties on them. It's kind of wacky, but that's just the way I see it. Patriots were also 2 for 2 on 4th down, so that's not a bad thing for Drake May to step up on those plays. I think both were passes. 3rd down, they were not as good, 3 for 13. Douglas, good player. Everyone else on offense, though, I thought was pretty bad. Like, I thought the guards were decent on Wenu and So. I thought played pretty well, but the 2 tackles struggled mightily. Jacobs was horrible in this game. Thomas was horrible in this game. Patriots, terrible tackle play. Mario Edwards played really well for the Texans. Hunter was kind of quiet. Honestly, like Anderson was the guy that was more so destructive. I thought the big storyline for the Texans was how well they ran the ball. 192 rushing yards in this game, including a scamper for Dameon Pierce for 77 yards, I believe. And 54 yards and a touchdown. My bad. I don't know where I got 77 from. That might have been a different game. Joe Mixon had over 100 yards on only 13 carries, 7.8 yards per carry, and a touchdown. He also caught a touchdown, I think. So he had a multi-touchdown game. Mixon was very, very good in this game. And as I pointed out early in this game, the difference between Mixon and all the other running backs, especially Cam Akers, is Joe Mixon has this ability to create 3 out of 0. This ability to create 6 out of 2. This ability to create 8 out of 4, right? Like Mixon has this like vision and this power and this just efficiency in his game where he just never allows negative runs. He always keeps an offense on schedule. And when you love to run the ball as much as the Texans do on early downs, you need a running back that is like that, where he just makes positive. Even if it's not explosive, he makes positive. So 41-21, Drake May has a nice performance in his first game. Not perfect, not perfect at all, but definitely nice, encouraging, explosive, and exactly what you would expect from Drake May, who I do think looks to be a franchise-capable in the future quarterback. Not right now, but in the future, and especially considering the defense he played, the mismatch on the line of scrimmage, and also the players around him that he's dealing with. Poor running back play, poor receiver play overall outside of Douglas. And then, the offensive line's bad. The defense played bad. Like, nobody really stood out or stepped up for the Patriots. 30-23, the Ravens take it over the Commanders in arguably the game of the week. Both teams are now 4-2. The Commanders finally fall back down a little bit to earth, but they still had an encouraging performance, making it a 7-point game in Baltimore. I mean, this is a team in Baltimore that destroyed the Bills at home. I know that the Ravens maybe had a little bit more encouragement in that game to maybe destroy the Bills because it was prime time and they were struggling at that point. So they needed a little bit more momentum, but still, the Commanders look to be a legitimate team because they hung in this game. I didn't feel like it was the best Jaden Daniels game, but again, statistically, he was good. 24 for 35, 269 yards, 2 touchdowns. This one would take a closer look. I think I'll have to go back to watch this in terms of Jaden Daniels. Lamar was highly efficient, and I felt like, once again, I feel like a Lamar hater at this point, but I feel like he was more so a product of the offense in this game. I thought that the offensive scheme in this game was dialed in, and also Zay Flowers was fucking unstoppable. He had 9 catches on 9 targets. He was open on every play. And every time he got the ball, he made at least one person miss. He had 132 yards on 9 catches, 14.7 yards per catch and really was killing the Commanders until they actually resorted to doubling him and kind of taking him out of the game, which is then when Rashad Bateman stepped up. And Bateman, I think low-key has looked really good the last couple of weeks as a capable wide receiver too, which is very encouraging. Mark Andrews also had a couple explosive plays in the game. Likely was relatively quiet. Henry had his normal Henry game, 132 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, 24 carries, a lot of plunges, a lot of, just body blows, not a lot of explosives, a lot of body blows for the Ravens running back, 28 first downs. I thought they were very good off play action in this game, and I thought Lamar was able to take advantage of that with really good pockets, really good protection, and Lamar put the ball where he needed to go with the ball. I mean, again, this was more of like a Jared Goff type of Lamar performance than I felt like it was a MVP, most valuable player in the NFL type performance. It was like a very good game, efficient, on the money, did his thing, won the game, did what he needed to do. But I wasn't like sitting there like, wow, look at that play by Lamar. Not like last week against the Bengals when he was pushing people off and extending, and then making a crazy throw to Isaiah Likely for the touchdown. So, Baltimore just outplayed them. 28 first downs to 18 for Washington. I think the clear thing was that Baltimore's defense was just a little bit better than Washington's. And Baltimore's defense is not very good, in my opinion. Like, Baltimore's defense definitely gave up plays in this game. Their secondary still looks like it's struggling, but the run defense, especially, was a huge edge. And I thought, while Flowers was able to consistently create separation and consistently make plays, and Bateman later on in the game against the corners of the Commanders, McLaurin, he was held mostly in check. He did have 2 touchdowns, but only 6 overall catches for 53 yards, right? So the Ravens were able to kind of limit McLaurin's explosiveness, limit the Commanders' explosiveness outside of a couple of Daniels scrambles around, to buy time. And then Ertz kind of made a couple big plays down the field, but it felt like they weren't able to run the ball without Brian Robinson, who was desperately missed. Austin Eckler only had 2.3 yards per carry. The Ravens continue to be one of the best run defenses in the league, one of the best run offenses in the league. And like I've said, that this kind of becomes a common theme. Ravens, 28 first downs, Washington, 18. Third down, 6 for 10, 60% will get the job done. 4 for 12 for Washington, although they were 1 for 1 on fourth. Right, this is the big difference. 176 rushing yards for the Ravens, 52 for the Commanders. If you look at the Commanders' success, what has been happening, not only has Daniels been efficient, accurate, on the money, but their run game has been one of the best in football. Today, 52 yards. And obviously Brian Robinson hurts, but didn't appear that there was much space to be had with those runs either, whether it be McNichols, Eckler, or whoever ran the ball. Also, I will say a number of the throws that Daniels made I thought were accurate. Like, I thought his ball placement in this game, once again, was very good. I wouldn't really argue that he was off on very many throws. 484 total yards for the Ravens, 3 sacks on defense, 1 interception. 1 interception thrown by Lamar, 0 for Daniels. 1 punt, though, for the Ravens is pretty impressive. And the Commanders' defense, like I said, I think it's going to be the back-breaking element of the team. 36 minutes of possession. Ravens able to run the ball. Commanders not, but the Commanders' defense is not very good. We know this. So I think that's kind of going to be the back-breaking part of this team right now. So, yeah, I've got the Ravens on top of the Commanders, 30-23. Then later on in the day, we had the Chargers beat the Broncos 23-16. This game was kind of over by half, and although the Chargers kind of got dominated after the half, 17 points by the Broncos in the fourth quarter to make it kind of interesting, coming down to an onside kick. The Chargers were up, I think, 23-0. 23-0. And then the Broncos put up some garbage time stuff. But this game, I think the difference was honestly the quarterback play. I thought this was by far Herbert's best game I've seen him play this year. He was 21 for 34 for 237 and 1 touchdown. And the stat line is not like amazingly impressive. But I thought early in the game, he threw a lot of attempts and was highly efficient. He looked better from a movement standpoint and a mobility standpoint. He was on the money, accurate, and he made a lot of nice throws. And Bo Nix, meanwhile, was pretty terrible in this game. I know his stats are not bad. 19 for 33, 216, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. But he was awful early. He was running around, missing throws, trying to throw the ball across his body, getting sacked. Really, the only thing he would do is run around in circles and run for a first down or something like that. That was like the best thing he would do all day. J.K. Dobbins also had a workhorse bell cow performance, 25 carries for 96 yards. Once again, another running game that got going compared to Javonte Williams, 6 carries for 23 yards and a fumble. That's again, these two teams that like to play defense, like to run the ball. One team ran it, one team didn't. Chargers had 22 first downs, and like I said with Herbert, this is the big area you see the difference in the teams. 11 for 18 on third down were the Chargers. 11 for 18. Ladd McConkey was really good in this game. I felt like early in the game, he looked like Edelman a couple times, kind of trying to make people miss. Denver was 3 for 11 on third down. So, huge difference there. In terms of anything else stick out, just 37 minutes of possession for the Chargers compared to 22 for the Broncos. But Vidal gets on the board with his first ever touch, going for a touchdown at the NFL level, 38 yards from Herbert, which is a beautiful pass in this game. Dicker continues to be on the money. And yeah, I think the Broncos kind of come back down to earth. They get a loss after, what was expected to be a little bit of a, perhaps an upset. They were 3-point dogs at home. People thought they could win this game, but the Chargers were the better team from the jump. I was really impressed with the Chargers in terms of their overall run defense, their discipline defensively. Denzel Perryman made a huge 4th down stop, or maybe a 2-point stop. That was really impressive. That was a nice play. Derwin James played well. I thought that Ladd McConkey stood out. J.K. Dobbins stood out. But Herbert, I think, was the story. Herbert versus Bo Nix. That's basically what the game came down to, and Herbert won. No surprise. Herbert, if he plays like that for the rest of the year, Chargers could be a playoff team because I think their defense might be legit. It's at least solid. And if they can find more consistency from their receivers, I think the Chargers will be cooking with potentially a wild card competition. The Steelers take it over the Raiders 32-13, which is a deceptive score because the Raiders easily could have been in this game if not for a number of penalties at inopportune times and also turnovers, which is the story of the Raiders season. But you're not going to win many games when you go 2 for 11 on third down and 1 for 3 on fourth down and you total 275 yards. But meanwhile, the Steelers only had 293 yards and only 110 passing yards. I thought Justin Fields was fucking terrible in this game, and I just continued to yell at my TV. He was awful. 14 for 24, 145 yards, 75 passer rating. He didn't make a catastrophic mistake, but he was not good. He ran the ball for a couple touchdowns, I think. Those were maybe his best plays of the game. Otherwise, I didn't think he played well, but Najee played really well. 14 carries, 106 yards. This is by far the best game I've seen him play all year. 7.6 yards per carry and a touchdown. Meanwhile, the Raiders, have struggled with the run game all season. They were expected to struggle. Raiders didn't have Christian Wilkins. That allowed the Steelers to run the ball. We cover on this bet. This was a best bet for a reason. The Steelers came through with their voodoo, right? There was 3 fumbles by the Raiders. 2 of them lost. A couple red zone turnovers by the Raiders as well. And Chris Boswell did his thing, hitting a number of kicks, hit 4 field goals in the game. Najee ran it. Steelers played conservative offense. Fields didn't turn it over. Pickens, again, very quiet on 3 for 8, 3 receptions, 8 targets, only 53 yards. Really nice touchdown by, I think it was it a 2-point attempt? Maybe it was reversed. I remember a touchdown in the back of the end zone by Freiermuth. I think it might have been reversed. It was a really nice play, though. That was a sweet catch. That was reversed. Crosby seemed really frustrated on the sidelines at one point in the game. And the Raiders their offense, like Brock Bowers is their only real weapon. Everybody else is like a 4th-string receiver. I mean, they've got like Trey Tucker, DJ Turner, Christian Wilkerson, who scored a touchdown at the end of the game. Aiden O'Connell was not much better than Gardner Minshew, but Honestly, I do think he might be a little bit better. Like, I like how he throws the ball. Like, I like how he throws with power at the middle of the field. I think he has a stronger arm than Minshew. He can't really move, though. But I think if he had better receivers, it would definitely help. His receivers are Christian Wilkerson, DJ Turner, Trey Tucker, really. And then the O-line for the Raiders is catastrophic. They lost like 3 players on their O-line. I mean, just absolutely terrible. So, like, you gotta give it up for the Raiders. They're a terrible football team. They're in the bottom tier of the league. But the Steelers, they're one of the worst 4-2 teams that you'll ever see. They're not a good team. Their defense is good, but again, they just feast on these terrible offenses. We even saw them play a mediocre offense last week, and they weren't as good. But they're turnover merchants. They're turnover machines. 3 turnovers for the Raiders, a bunch of penalties. It felt like every time the Raiders had a good play, it was a penalty, like personal foul every first down. Like, it was such a terrible watch. It was like watching the Patriots versus the Patriots. It was awful. Atlanta, 38-20 over the Panthers in what was a competitive game for a majority of the time, and the Falcons pulled away in the late portion of the game. This was basically the storyline of the game was the Falcons running game. They were just bludgeoning the Panthers. They had 188 rushing yards. Bijan played well. Algier played well. Bijan 15 for 95, 6.3 yards per carry, and finally 2 touchdowns on the ground. Finally, Algier, one thing I'd say about him, he feels like a classic Bill Belichick running back. Just stands out to me. He reminds me of one of those power backs that the Patriots used to have. Just a tough runner. But those two are awesome to watch. Younghoe Koo came up with his field goals. Drake London, again, played really well. 6 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown. I thought Deontay Johnson had a good game. 6 for 78 and a touchdown. Thought Andy Dalton played well. I know he had 2 interceptions. One of them at the end was pretty bad. He missed a throw, pretty crazy outside the pocket. But that's not really Dalton's game, running outside the pocket trying to make a throw. But he was 26 for 38, 221, 2 touchdowns, and I thought he got what he wanted, especially early in the game. Through the first 3 quarters, the Panthers moved the ball. They ran the ball well. Hubbard had 92 yards on 5.1 yards per attempt, and Sanders had a couple plays. Leggett had a touchdown. Deontay made some plays. Like, they were able to move the ball. Andy Dalton is a decent quarterback. I felt like if the Panthers had a defense in this game, they would have won. But unfortunately, they don't. And I feel like most of the NFC South doesn't have a defense right now. Kirk Cousins was kind of like okay. Like, he wasn't incredible. Like, most of his plays came off play action. 19 for 30, 225, and a touchdown. Atlanta had 25 first downs. But again, majority of those, I bet, came off of the running game. They had 198 yards rushing, 423 total yards. They felt like they never punted. They punted once. So there you go. And they only had 5 penalties. Meanwhile, Carolina had 10. A lot of them pass interferences, holdings, things like that. And the possession was fairly similar, which I think then goes to show that Carolina did move the ball. 21 first downs, right? 335 total yards. But they had 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles, which I think was ultimately the difference, the turnovers. I think if there were no turnovers and Atlanta's defense maybe was a little bit better, they were able to force those turnovers, while Carolina's defense might be the worst in the league right now. I mean, it's so bad. They just don't have anybody that makes plays out there. So, yeah, Atlanta over Carolina, 38-20 is the final game to discuss here. Bengals and Giants are underway. I'm going to have to catch up with that first quarter. Looks like the Bengals are up 7-0. Hopefully they come through with the win today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this recap, man. Let me know what you thought. I'm just going to skim the games in case I forgot anything. Doesn't look like it. Of course, I was at the game. 49ers, Seahawks on Thursday night. A lot of fun. Niners might be back, especially offensively. They had 500 yards. Brock Purdy looking like an MVP out there. A lot of fun always to go to Seattle and witness a football game. That's a great atmosphere. I'd recommend it if you haven't. George Kittle owes me tickets because he has 5 touchdowns in 2 games that I've attended of his. So thanks, guys, for watching. Story of the day, Dallas sucks. But the NFL is back, at least in terms of more normal play out there. Thanks for watching. It's Mitch. Peace. Gronk spiked the like button.